Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to immediately give the floor to Dr. Jihad so that we can start.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Dina. Dear colleague Nizar Sartawi, our speaker, presenter today, dear colleagues and friends. I'm very pleased to introduce the poet and translator, Nizar Sartawi. Nizar is an old friend of mine, and he is a colleague also in the Jordanian Writers Association. He is a poet and translator. He holds a bachelor's degree in English literature, English language and literature, from the University of Jordan, and a master's degree in human resources development from the University of Minnesota. He's a member of the Jordanian Writers Association, JWA, and Arab Writers Union. He also serves as chair of the translation committee at JWA, يعني رابطة الكتاب. He has participated in poetry readings and international festivals in Jordan, Palestine, United Arab Emirates, Lebanon, Egypt, Morocco, Kosovo, India, among others. He has penned more than 25 books and chapbooks of poetry and poetry translations. His poetry and translations have been published in numerous international collections and in both print and online magazines and newspapers in different parts of the world. Without any further ado, Mr. Sartawi, poet and translator Sartawi, the floor is all yours. Further.
Respected professors and scholars, good evening. First, I'd like to thank my friend Dr. Jihad Hamdan, the TAU chair, who is also an active member of the translation committee at the Jordanian Writers Association, for inviting me to this forum, which is conducted monthly, as I understand. And also to thank Dr. Dina Salman for arranging for the event. It is really a great honor for me to be with you this evening. Having said that, I must admit, before delving into my presentation, that it is by no means an academic work. I take translating poetry and occasionally short stories as a hobby. It's true that once in a while I rub shoulders with academicians like yourselves, either by talking to them directly or virtually, as we're doing today, or by taking a look at some translation studies, though without immersing myself in academia. Therefore, I'm not familiar with all the jargon translation researchers use. Besides, I started practicing this hobby in the more recent years of my life, after retirement, to be more specific. So, without more ado, let me begin. Translation is occasionally viewed as an act of betrayal, and translators themselves are accused of being traitors. This feeling stems from the fact that translation involves more than just translating words between languages. It also entails interpreting and occasionally changing meaning, cultural quirks, and stylistic components. Some people believe that the meaning or essence of the original work has been compromised or betrayed if the translation is substantially different from the original. This can be particularly contentious in literary writings and especially poetry, where accuracy and fidelity to the original source are highly valued. It's no wonder that some Italian scholars in the Middle Ages coined the adage traditore, which means the translator is a traitor. They did this to express their strong disapproval of French translators of the Divine Comedy by Dante. According to them, these translations either failed to give an authentic and faithful representation of the content or compromised the aesthetic features in the work, or rather, of the work. In this presentation, I will discuss some of the challenges that translators could face when translating poetry in particular, and throw some light on the strategies they may use in dealing with these challenges, providing a few examples of poetry translations, some my own. We'll talk about impossibility and necessity of translating poetry. Literary translation is in general, and poetry translation in particular, is a challenging and complex process that has generated a lot of discussion. Scholars and poets alike have examined both the impossibility and necessity of translating poetry. Those who argue that it is impossible for poetry to be translated are mainly concerned about the loss of poetic qualities, cultural and contextual nuances, and intricacies of language. To begin with, Robert Frost claims that poetry is what gets lost in translation, thus highlighting the special manner in which sound, rhythm, and meaning interact in the source language, and how this cannot be properly translated. Other scholars like Roman Jacobson, for example, deny that poetry can be translated in the first place. Poetry, by definition, he claims, is untranslatable, since it depends on the phonetic and rhythmic characteristics of the source language. According to him, the sole option for the translator is to engage in what he calls creative transposition, in which case they have to write an entirely new poem in the target language. Likewise, Ezra Pound, who was involved in translating Chinese poetry into English, affirms that translating poetry is almost an impossible process that demands more than word conversion. It also requires capturing the spirit and essence of the original. And Lawrence Venuta protests that translations frequently domesticate the intrinsic foreignness of poetry, thereby losing its subtle allusions. On the other hand, those who advocate the necessity of translating poetry say that it promotes cultural exchange and understanding, broadens literary horizons, and helps in evolving new forms. Thus, translation is viewed by Mexican poet Octavio Paz as a way to enhance cross-cultural communication. George Steiner, a French-American writer, maintains that translation is a vital literary technique which gives readers access to a wide range of poetic traditions and voices. And Edward Said draws our attention to another advantage of translation in general, explaining how translation functions as a tool of resistance and cultural identity reclamation in post-colonial settings. Let's examine the challenges of poetry translation. Poetry translation, then, has its own set of difficulties, mostly related to form, meaning, and cultural context, and how they interact so intricately. Here are a few major challenges that translators have to deal with. One major challenge is to preserve form and structure. This is particularly significant when dealing with rhyme and meter, especially in poems with specific schemes, such as sonnets. Can the translator find equivalents in the target language to maintain the sound patterns in the original language? A similar difficulty also arises when considering stanzas and line breaks, which may have a great impact on how powerful a poem is. Can the translator imitate such structures in the target language? Another complexity is the need to maintain the semantic meaning in the target language. In this respect, figurative language must be taken into account, since poets frequently employ similes and metaphors which might not have exact translations in other languages. Certainly, maintaining the original meaning while still making sense in the target language is not an easy task for the translator. Similarly, wordplay and puns, i.e., the use of word sounds and homonyms or multiple meanings, common in poetry, do not readily lend themselves to translation. A third difficulty lies in how to express tone and mood. Emotional nuances such as word choice, rhythm, and sound can all affect a poem's tone and mood. Conveying the same emotional resonance in a different language can be very complicated. The same thing can be said about voice and style. The poet's distinct voice and stylistic decisions shape the poem's identity. Translators have to figure out how to present this uniqueness while still following the rules of the target language. Handling the cultural context and references poses yet another challenge. In this regard, one aspect the translator must consider is cultural specificity. Poets frequently make references to places, customs, and events that readers from other cultures might not be familiar with. It's up to translators to decide if they want to include explanation notes or modify these references. Additionally, idiomatic expressions might be challenging for translators. It is possible to translate idioms. Is it possible to translate idioms, collocations, colloquial terms effectively, since they have a strong cultural foundation or background? A fifth obstacle is to preserve aesthetic features. This mainly includes sound devices, such as alliteration, assonance, consonants, and so on, which are commonly used to enhance the poem's musicality. It can be difficult to replicate these effects in a different language while keeping the message intact. Finally, the translator's interpretation of the poem is a sensitive undertaking. For instance, the translator might be subjective, in which case they provide their own interpretation of the poem, which may have an impact on the translation as a whole. Therefore, the same poem may be translated rather differently by various translators. Here it's crucial to strike a balance between creativity and fidelity in order to effectively translate the poem's meaning into the target language. Thus, the translator is divided between being true to the original text and taking creative liberties. Because of all these complexities, translating poetry is an intricate art form requiring fluency in the target language, a profound understanding of both the source and target cultures, as well as creative writing skills. Let me move to strategies of translating poetry with examples. It's quite obvious that poetry translation calls for a unique combination of linguistic proficiency, cultural awareness, and inventiveness. Here are some approaches translators can adopt to address the difficulties involved in translating poetry. One such technique is putting meaning above form rather than strictly following the poem's original form. It is very useful for the translator to concentrate on communicating the poem's main idea and emotional impact. Shihab al-Ghanim, a poet and translator from the United Arab Emirates, produced a poem in free verse in translating Sonnet 18 by Shakespeare. The poem is very well known. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose positions of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Here's Al-Ghanim's translation, free verse. هل أقارنك بيوم صيفي؟ أنت أحلى وأكثر اعتدالا، فالرياح الهوجاء قد تهز براعم أيار الحبيبة، وفترة الصيف قصيرة الأيام، وأحيانا تشرح عين السماء بحرارة أكثر مما ينبغي، وأحيانا يكون لونها الذهبي مكفهرا، وكل جميل ينحدر أحيانا من قمة جماله، إما بفعل الصدفة أو بتغيير الطبيعة لمجراها من دون انضباط، لكن صيفك الأبدي لن يتلاشى أو يفقد امتلاك ذلك الجمال الذي في يديك، ولن يستطيع الموت أن يفاخر بأنك تسيرين في ظله إذا أنت تقارعين عين الزمن في هذه الأسطر الأبدية. فطالما هناك رجال يتنفسون وعيون ترى، طالما تحيا هذه الأسطر وتهبك الحياة. I will later refer to another version by the same poet and comment on this poem. Adapt now a second technique, adapting rhyme and meter. If the source poetry makes use of rhyme and meter, where possible, the translator can look for patterns in the target language that have a similar melodic quality. In certain instances, it may be important to forego precise rhyme in favor of a more organic flow. To go back to Al-Ghanim, it's interesting that he did another translation of Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Here is the poem, his poem. لست أختا ليوم صيف جميل، لست أختا ليوم صيف جميل، أنت أرقى لطافة واعتدالا، فالرياح الهوجاء ترعش أحيانا براعم أيار التي تتلالى، ومدى الصيف لا يدوم طويلا، وبه الشمس قد تفيض اشتعالا، والسنى العسجدي حين نراه مكفهرا خلف الغيوم الحبالا، كل حسن يزل من قمة الحسن بفعل الأيام إذ تتوالى، إنما صيفك المنور صيف، إنما صيفك المنور صيف أبدي يفيض دوما جمالا، والردى نفسه بعيد بعيد ليس يلقي عليه يوما ظلالا، إذ تظلين في الزمان دواما في سطور اللائي ملئن جلالا، طالما أنفس هنا وعيون، طالما تشعل السطور خيالا. In this rhyme translation, Al-Ghanim employs al-khafif Arabic meter. al-khafif فاعلات مستفعل فاعلات. But from the first line, it is clear that Al-Ghanim's poem addresses a lady, because he says, لست أختا. Scholars, however, have identified an anonymous young man known as the fair young youth to be the addressee. I was baffled why he did not notice this. Using free verse also offers more latitude in expressing the poem's message and tone when rhyme and meter prove to be too limited. Shihab Al-Ghanim's Sonnet 18, of course, is an example that I've read already. Maintaining a balance between originality and faithfulness is also another important technique. Here, a translator may use creative license, but without going too far from the original material. Here is a poem titled Cicada by the Greek poet Anacreon. He died the beginning of the 5th century BC. And the poem is followed by my translation of the same into Arabic, leaning on Henry David's through translation, because I don't speak Greek, of course. We pronounce thee happy, Cicada, for on the tops of the trees, drinking a little dew, like any king thou singest, for thine are they all. Whatever thou seest in the fields, and whatever the woods bear, thou art the friend of the husbandmen, in no respect injuring any one. And thou art honored among men, sweet prophet of summer. The muses love thee, and Phoebus himself loves thee, and has given thee a shrill song. Age does not rack thee, thou skillful, earthborn, song-loving, unsuffering, bloodless one, almost thou art like the gods. I call this Ziz al-Hasad in Arabic. زيز الحصاد إننا نشير بالبنان إليك في حفاوة أنت السعيد الهاني فوق أعالي الدوح كالمليك في أماني مرتشفا قطر الندى تصدح بالألحان يا مالكا كل الذي تراه في الأطيان وكل ما تحمله الأشجار في الأغصان أنت لفلاح العقول أصدق الخلان لا تعرف الأذى ولا تسعى إلى الطغيان أنت الذي تحظى بإكبار بني الإنسان أيا نبي الصيف في رونقك الفتان لقد هوتك ملهمات الفن والبيان the muses حتى أبل نفسه حفك بالحنان قد انجلى عطاؤه في لحنك الرنان يا من تعيش آمنا من سطوة الزمان يا بارعا يا ابن الثرى يا عاشق الأغاني يا من الهموم لا تشقى ولا تعاني كلا ولا تجري الدماء فيك كالإنسان توشك أن تكون من آلهة اليونان. You can see how I eschewed the word thou art a god, one of the gods, just said آلهة اليوناني, not our own God. In this translation, I have used a rajaz meter, mustafilun, taking into account that there is little in common between Arabic prosody and European prosody. Another advice given to translators is to reconstruct wordplay and puns. They must look for comparable wordplays in the target language when wordplay or puns are used. For example, in the Sonnet 138, Shakespeare plays on the double meaning of the verb lie. In the second line, lie simply means to make an untrue statement. Here are the first two lines. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies. In the couplet at the end of the sonnet, the meaning of lie shifts. Therefore, Shakespeare says, therefore, I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. This is followed by the preposition lies, followed by the preposition with. The same verb takes a new, and so the same verb takes a new meaning. Sleep. Here in my Arabic translation of the couplet, I write, بذا رضينا بذا رضينا فتراني لها مخادعا وهي كذاك معي طاب لنا المخدع حقا كما نفوسنا طابت بما تدعي. The word مخادعا suggests both meanings, lying by خداع and sharing a bed, derived from the word مخدع, which also appears in the next line to reinforce the pun. Anyway, here is the poem in its entirety. حبيبتي تقسم لي أنها للصدق أما وأبا تنسب صادقة عندي ولو أنني أدري يقينا أنها تكذب ما ضرني إذ قد ترى أنني فتى غرير لم يزل يلعب مع عرك الدنيا وتسييفها ولا سعى فيها به مركب وهكذا أرضي غروري بأن أخالها تحسبني يافعة مع أنها تعلم أني امرؤ أيامه الأجمل قد ودع لسانها يعذب في مسمعي تلفيقه الحلو الذي أبدعه بمثل هذا أخمدت نبرة الصدق الذي نكره أن نسمعه لكن لماذا هي تبدي الوفا معلنة غير الذي تكتم وهل خليق بي وقد شخت أن أخفي من الأعوام ما أعلم نعم وهل أجمل في العشق من أن ندعي تصديق ما نزعم والسن هذا شأنه في الهوى الحلو فيه أنه مبهم بذا رضينا فتراني لها مخادعا وهي كذاك معي طاب لنا المخدع حقا كما نفوسنا طابت بما تدعي. And it seems like I've overlooked including the poem in its original form. Another way of dealing with translation, translating poetry, is to maintain tone and mood, making use of target language word choices and sentence patterns that convey comparable feelings and milieus. Take, for example, Iraqi translators' rendering in Arabic of a poem titled The American Indian Holocaust Museum by Native American poet Alex C. Sherman. Here is the original poem in English. The American, what do we indigenous people want from our country? We stand over mass graves. Our collective grief makes us numb. We are waiting for the construction of our museum. We too could stack shoes of our dead and fill a city to its 13th floor. What did you expect us to become? What do we indigenous people want from our country? We are waiting for the construction of our museum. We are the great-grandchildren of Sand Creek and Wounded Knee. We are the veterans of the Indian Wars. We are the sons and daughters of the Walking Dead. We have lost everyone. What do we indigenous people want from our country? We stand over mass graves. Our collective grief makes us numb. We are waiting for the construction of our museum. Here's the translation that Zubaydi rendered. متحف الهولوكوست الهندي الأمريكي. ما الذي نريده نحن السكان الأصليين من بلدنا؟ نقف فوق المقابر الجماعية. حزننا الجمعي يفقدنا حسنا. ننتظر تشييد متحفنا. نحن أيضا نستطيع أن نكدس أحذية موتانا ونملأ المدينة حتى طابقها الثالث عشر. ماذا كنتم تتوقعون أن نصبح؟ ما الذي نريده نحن السكان الأصليين من بلدنا؟ ننتظر تشييد متحفنا. نحن أحفاد الجرف الرملي والركبة الجريحة. نحن محاربو الحروب الهندية القدامى. نحن أبناء وبنات الموتى السائرين. لقد فقدنا الجميع. ما الذي نريده نحن السكان الأصليين من بلدنا؟ نقف فوق المقابر الجماعية. حزننا الجمعي يفقدنا حسنا. ننتظر تشييد متحفنا. Apparently, Zubaydi have succeeded in conveying the sad tone of a native poet, American poet, lamenting the grievances of his people. Also, translators could consult and collaborate with poets and native speakers as for their knowledge. This can help the translator to keep the poetic nature of the work and make it easy for the target audience to understand. For example, in the early 70s, one Jordanian poet, whose name I've forgotten, collaborated with Mr. Martins, a British instructor of literature at the University of Jordan, to translate Palestinian poetry. Resorting to cultural adaptation by modifying cultural allusion so that the intended audience may understand them is also another way of working with translations. This can be achieved by giving brief explanations or replacing phrases that are culturally particular with comparable ideas that new audience is familiar with. For example, American poet Jackie Allen, in her poem Wings, refers to the tap dance, a dance that uses the sounds of tap shoes striking the floor. She says, when the wind breeze howls and moans day and night, and trees sway and acorns drop, it is as if in a movie I see my past tap dancing across the tin rooftop of my mountain home. In translating the poem, I have translated tap dance as dabka, which is quite familiar in the Levant region. So this is my translation. أجنحة. حين تروح الريح العاصفة تعوي وتئن ليل نهار وتتمايل الأشجار وتتساقط حبات البلوط. يبدو ذلك كما لو كان فيلما نرى فيه الماضي يرقص الدبكة فوق سطح بيتي الجبلي المبني من الصفيح. Also, another way is to publish bilingual editions in which the translated content is offered alongside the original. This is a new trend in modern publications of translated poetry. For example, Lebanese translator Taghreed Boumer'i produces bilingual Spanish-Arabic and Arabic-Spanish poetry translations. I personally have published about 15 bilingual Arabic-English books and chapbooks of poetry composed by Jordanian and Arab poets. I also published 5 English-Arabic books of poetry composed by non-Arab poets. Using annotation or footnotes that explain challenging or culturally unique allusions. This can aid in comprehending the subtleties and context that may be lost in translation. For example, in his Indian Holocaust poem, Sherman, which we've read previously, Sherman makes 3 enigmatic references that Az-Zubaydi overlooks. The first is statues, which most probably refers to a memorial of 60 iron shoes on the Danube bank Budapest, the capital of Hungary, created by sculptor Gyula Power. The iron shoe sculptors represent the footwear that fascist Arrow Cross militiamen who ordered 3,500 Budapesters, of whom 800 were Hungarian Jews, to take off their shoes and leave them behind just before they were executed at the edge of the water in 1944. The second and third references are Sand Creek and Wounded Knee, as Zubaydi translates these as Al-Jurf al-Ramli wal-Rukba al-Jariha. But those who are familiar with native Indian cultures can guess that they are proper names of native Indian chieftains, maybe, or chiefs, maybe. Another example is my translation of Indian poet Kamal Thuraya's poem, The Maggots. Here's a short poem. At sunset on the river bank, Krishna loved her for the last time and left. That night in her husband's arms, Radha felt so dead that he asked, "What is wrong? Do you mind my kisses, love?" And she said, "No, not at all," but thought, "What is it to the corpse if the maggots snip?" In other words, she didn't care about her husband because she was with Krishna. Now, this is the poem in Arabic. عند غروب الشمس على ضفة النهر ضاجعها كريشنا للمرة الأخيرة ورحل. في تلك الليلة شعرت رادها وهي بين ذراعي زوجها أنها ميتة حتى أنه سألها: ما المشكلة؟ أتمانعين أن أقبلك يا حبيبتي؟ قالت: لا أبدا، لكنها قالت في نفسها: ماذا يضير الجثة إن عضتها الديدان. Here I provide a couple of footnotes to give some information about Radha, who was the daughter of a king and then became a goddess, and Krishna, who is a major deity in Hinduism. So, using these techniques can help translators to successfully negotiate the challenging of translating poetry and create works that respect the spirit and aim of the original poems while striking a chord with new audiences. I wonder if I have some time to read a couple of translations. Do we?
How much time? You need 5 minutes, for instance?
Much, maybe 5 minutes at most, maybe less.
Okay, yeah, that's
okay.
fine.
Just reading them and leaving that for the audience.
Yes.
The first poem is by Persian poet Farrukh Farkhzad. It's very short. It says, I speak out of the deep of night, out of the deep of darkness, and out of the deep of night I speak. If you come to my house, friend, bring me a lamp and a window. I can look through at the crowd in the happy alley. In Persian, this has rhyme, actually. Here's my translation. أدية. فاروق فرخزاد. أتحدث من أعماق الليل أنا، من قلب العتم ومن أعماق الليل أنا أتحدث يا صاح. إن جئت إلى بيتي أحضر لي مصباحا، أحضر نافذة أشهد منها الجمع الحاشدة في الدرب الحافل بالأفراح. And the last one is the Bedouin Song. It's a poem that I wrote in English and also translated into Arabic. The Bedouin Song. I'm just a Bedouin. I live in a tent, cozy and fair, its fabric woven from rough goat hair. A shady cover in the summer, a rainproof shelter in the winter. My positions, a single garment, a tall black robe that I call a thobe, and other little things I put in a sack that may not fit the countrysiders' appetites or urbanites with apostrophe. My homeland all this infinite expanse of deep beige sands, my sole companion, a faithful camel who carries me and all my stuff, and together we cross the endless desert. And when I sing some camel's song, he gets so light out of the light and makes as if to fly towards the sky. And in Arabic, أغنية البدوي: أنا لست سوى بدوي أسكن خيمة سكنا تعمره البهجة والدفء نسيجا خشنا من شعر الماعز يمنحني الظل إذا أقبل الصيف يمنحني الظل إذا أقبل الصيف يحميني إن حل شتاء أمتعتي ثوب فضفاض أسود نعلان عتيقان ودلة قهوة وخليط من أشياء أحملها في كيس أشياء أن لا يتقبلها ريفي الذوق ولا حضري الأهواء. وطني هذا الأفق الممتد رمالا ذكناء ورفيقي الأوحد في الدرب بعير فيه وفاء يحملني ومتاعي ومعا نمضي عبر مفازات الصفراء وحين أغني بحداء الجمال يزهو طربا ويخف ويعلو نحو فضاءات الكون الزرقاء. That's the end of the poem. And then I'd like to extend my thanks to you, Dr. Jihad, and to Dr. Dina, and all listeners. Thanks for bearing with me. A great honor indeed, and a privilege.
Thank you very much indeed, Poet Sartawi. Before I open the floor for feedback and for questions or remarks, I'd like to welcome colleagues and students who have joined us after the onset of this seminar. I see lots of names in front of me. They are all welcome to this important activity. Just again, I'd like to highlight that in our audience, we have poets, we have translators of poetry as well. We have teachers of literature, professors of literature, and professors of linguistics as well, in addition to graduate students in language and literature. And so we can say we have an interested audience who are here because probably they love poetry, because they love translation, and because they are engaged, yes, in this task, whether as academicians or as just readers and lovers of poetry. Thank you again. The floor is open for all sorts of feedback, questions, remarks, interventions. You are all welcome. Yes. And I look at hands, if I see hands. Yes, I can see Professor Muhammad Fargan. Professor Fargan, the floor is all yours.
يعطيك العافية أبو مؤيد. You've done a good job, and I really thank your lecturer for a very interesting presentation. I'd like to make a couple of points which are general in nature. To me, what makes translation possible at large is the fact that we have form and content. The content is relatively stable. The form is definitely variable. So the same poem, for example, may receive different translations from different translators, or even from the same translator, simply because the content can manifest itself in different forms. This is one thing. The second thing has to do with the fact that we translate for an audience. We do not translate for each other. Okay, this is the trick, okay? And probably we are making a good living out of this. The fact that we translate, or at least we look at translation as involving us as academics. This is just one part of the game. The main part has to do with an authentic kind of audience. When I translate a poem, for example, I do not translate it for another scholar to look at it and compare it with the original, but rather I translate it for an authentic target reader, someone who may read it while on the train or while on the bus. And thank you very much, Dr. Nizar, for this very interesting presentation. And apparently you are a well-versed poetry translator, but I would like to probably draw your attention to the fact that the machine has entered the playground and it can do very interesting jobs for translators, even for poetry translators. And thank you very much for this very interesting session.
Thank you very much, Professor Ferrell, for this also very interesting remark. It's a remark and a note coming from an academician and from a professional translator. You have been here and you have been with us and you have been with translation for a long time. You are also well published in this area. And I know that you undertook tasks that are relatively difficult, translating pre-Islamic poetry into idiomatic English. That is not an easy task anyway, but it's true that in translation, a text is just like any other text. It manifests itself differently to different recipients. I mean, poetry is just like other texts. However, the problems are different, but the task is essentially the same. Interaction, a certain particular reading, and then to translate again this into another language. And like what you had mentioned, it's not just translated for someone to compare and contrast. It's translated, the text is translated for people to enjoy, maybe to study, maybe to appreciate this type of creation and creativity. Colleague Nizar, would you like to respond to this remark coming from a dear friend and colleague, Professor Abu Yazid Ahmad Farag?
Thank you, Abu Moyed, for your kind words. Okay. And yeah, I'd like to hear Dr. Nizar's comments on what I have said.
Doctor, I'm not even a specialist in translation. It's a hobby, as I said earlier. But let me first say, I'm so happy to meet here, face to face with Dr. Farrell. I know the writing, your writing. I've read some of your articles, and I was really impressed. And today, I'm so glad. I didn't expect you to attend this, but well, here you are. And
thank you very much. Okay, I take this as a great compliment.
And I learned a lot from what you write, really. I know your school of, and you tend to even summarize this whole thing of translation, especially when it comes, for example, to domestication and foreignization and other things, and translating word for word and sense for sense. You did a great job of making this easy for us to comprehend, because the whole thing, it seems, revolves around that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other remarks? We have Dr. Lisa Sharman. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you very much. I am a professor of English from Daffodil International University, Bangladesh. That session was so spellbound. I was just enjoying every bit of it. Thank you so much to the presenter. Though I don't understand Arabic very well, but the music, the rhythm there, I enjoyed. It was wonderful. And the translators forum itself was is amazing actually. And as I do translate, I have become tempted to just read one of my translation. It's from our national poet, Kazi Nazrul Islam. He wrote a poem which is usually sang. Let me just read it out in front of you. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be connected with you. You are such an enormous child. That means he is dedicating it to our creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, you are such an enormous child, busy playing with the universe, creating and destroying like a doll's house, unmindfully in a pin drop silence. In the barren, wide sky, you are meditating luxurious thoughts of developing and massacring things you like, unmindfully in a pin drop silence. The sun, the moon, and thousands of stars are left there at your crimson feet. O great, generous, omnipotent, can stand in every well and oh, laughing and playing to yourself unmindfully in a pin drop silence. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharman. Very interesting. And this is an invitation also for the next seminar. We are meeting on the first Saturday every month. Yes, the beginning of every month. And we have a session for translation, then a session for literature, and a third one in linguistics. You are most welcome to be with us. Thank you for this nice translation, though of course we do not know the original, just like what you have said, but it sounds great. Thank you. Dr. Nizar, would you like to make a comment?
Certainly, I'd like to for her poem, and just to tell her that a couple of things. First, I'm so much impressed with Indian poets. I visited India 3 times. I was invited for poetry reading. Kerala I visited once, and Vijayawada, I'm sure she knows this, I visited twice. And actually what I noticed 2 things about India. First, that so many women were present in those festivals, those international festivals. And the second thing is they write very well. A third point is that India, there are so many languages in India, but I've noticed in some languages, I can't say which, resonate with me because they use almost the same meters that we use in Arabic. So when I heard them reading, I knew, oh yes, that's like Arabic. But of course, there are also Indian poets who write in Arabic, because there are colleges that teach Arabic and Islamic culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed for your orientation here. Thank you. Thank you. And I am typing my email there. I would be glad if you just send me somehow an invitation letter to join the next session. It would be wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Poet Radwan Shlul, an old and dear friend, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, dear Jihad. Dear Dr. Jihad, I'm sorry. Well, first,
It's okay, perfect.
with due respect, sir. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jihad and Dr. Dina, for the great efforts that you have been making actually to put these meetings together. And I must say that they are really enlightening and enlightening at the same time. Now, first of all, I'd like to also thank my dear friend Abu Kamal actually for the great presentation he has just given. Well, I must say something about my friend Dr. Nizar actually. He's one of the guys that I do really feel proud to have as one of my friends actually. In fact, he is highly renowned and well noted and celebrated actually as a poet and a critic and translator at the same time. And to be honest, I came to know him actually via a friend of mine who's a pharmacist actually. She's called Dr. Ruba Rusan. She's a friend of mine and she is an unpublished poet writing Arabic poetry. But she told me that she had a passion for reading world poetry via translation. And she told me that she was a big fan of Dr. Nizar actually because she always finds pleasure in reading what he always comes up with in terms of being creative translations of different types of poetries, whether in Arabic, in English, and otherwise. So Abu Kamal, I'm so happy to listen to you here. And I should say that it's really a privilege for me to be here once again, Dr. Jihad. And I think that one of the challenges that really are so major and so significant and so tough actually that any translator of poetry can ever face actually is the problem of prosody and meter. In fact, it's a challenge. I mean, prosody is a challenge because it is basically a matter of something that is highly intuitive by nature, let's say, and it's very hard actually to measure. And I believe that, just as I said before, that in order for any text, poetic text, to be translated beautifully and authentically, I insist once again that the poet himself should be the translator of that poetic text. So I would say that translation can be really fun, but at the same time, it can be really demanding and a hard job that one can do actually. Perhaps I don't want to be talking in details actually. I just want to talk in broad terms about things that have to do with translating poetry, because I believe that this topic has been fully discussed and fully explained by my friend Dr. Nizar. And I must also say that this topic was also further discussed by my good friend Dr. Muhammad Farghal, who actually did a great job last time, or in a previous meeting actually, where he gave us some nice insights and points that had to do with translating poetry. And of course, they were just made by a scholar who's really highly reputed and respected. So I would like to say something about Abu Kamal, actually, my dear friend, Dr. Nizar. In fact, I was granted the privilege of meeting him in his abode in Amman, actually. I visited him in his abode, actually, at his house. And I requested him, actually, to blur my second collection, actually. It was still not in print. And I requested him to blur my second collection. He was so nice and so kind as to answer in the affirmative, actually. And he told me he would be more than happy to blur my book. And I must say that his short description of my second collection is still there, beautifying and adorning the back cover of my second collection. So thank you very much, Abu Kamal, for your generosity and your hospitality. You were really a great host, actually. And I still believe that, I want to reiterate what I had just said before, that if the poet himself translates his own works, he can come up with a great and creative piece of writing, actually. And I believe that the poem that Abu Kamal has just read, that he wrote himself, actually, which is a Bedouin song, actually, I must say that I have enjoyed it, reading it and listening to it, actually, in a way that can be really more interesting and intriguing, actually, than the other poems that he read, written by other poets that he tried his hand in translating. So I insist that when the poet translates his own poetry, he's bound to come up with creative works and masterpieces. And I must always say, as just Abu Kamal has just said, that translating poetry can never be endorsed as a replica of the original text. What I mean by that, I would like to give you an example, actually, to attest what I'm saying. In fact, a friend of mine once asked me to translate one of my poetries into Arabic. I told her, you are more than welcome. And she tried her hand at translating one of my poems. She came up with a very good piece of translation. And when she asked me about my opinion regarding that translation, I told her, well, you have done a great job, actually, translating my poem. But I must say that I cannot really take it for my poem. I would say that it's a new creation. It's a new baby of yours, and that was completely independent of my poem. So what I mean to say is that translation can never be taken for the original text. I would say that any translated text actually is the creation of somebody else who's the translator himself. So if you don't mind, of course, to simply attest to the point that I had just been making. If you don't mind, of course, I'll be more than happy to share with you one of my poems in English and with its translation in Arabic to give you just an example about how translation can work better for those who are the same composers of the poem. So if you don't mind, I want to read one of my poems and then read the Arabic.
If it's short,
actually,
it is short, Radwan, so because there are colleagues with hands up, yes, awaiting permission, a chance to speak.
My dear Dr. Jihad, in the previous meeting, actually, I wanted to read one of my poems, but unfortunately it was too short. I mean, the time was too short. I couldn't actually read it. So if you can be generous enough and lavish enough, actually, you can give me a couple of minutes actually to read them. That will be fine. If you don't, I will have to stop here. If you don't.
If it's for 2-3 minutes, 2 minutes, I would say I would pass it. I would pass it. Yeah.
Now, rest assured, dear, that it's not be longer than that. So to save time, let me read it right away, actually.
Yeah.
The English version of my poem is My Homeland, entitled My Homeland. Oh, my homeland, you are one of a kind. Wherever I look, I behold your beautiful land. Whenever I listen, I could hear your voices sound. As I close my eyes and inhale deep your soul's fragrance, I smell and breathe. Intoxicated with the air I find in your atmosphere. 100,000 miles should I travel, 200,000 years should I roam, a saga back home would surely unfold, in which I should strive, fight, and struggle, and combat all the foes that might confront me in battle. Home is heaven, can never be forgotten. Oh, my homeland, east or west, you are certainly the best. If you can be nice enough, Dr. Jihad, and generous enough with me, please let me just read the Arabic version of it.
Yeah, please
Thank you. This is the Arabic translation, actually, of my poem. It is entitled موطني. موطني كم أنت فريد حيثما نظرت رأيت أرضك الجميلة كلما أنصت سمعت صوت غنائك عندما أغمض عيني وأتنفس عميقا أشتم عبير ترابك وأستنشقه ثمل بالهواء الذي أجده في أجوائك لو سافرت 100,000 ميل وتطوفت 200,000 سنة ستتجلى ملحمة في طريق العودة فيها سأكافح وأحارب وأناضل وأقاتل كل الأعداء الذين في المعركة سأواجه الوطن جنة ولا يمكن أن ينسى يا وطني في الشرق أو في الغرب لا شك أنك الأجمل والأسمى يا وطني في الشرق أو في الغرب لا شك أنك الأجمل والأسمى. And thank you very much, my dear Dr. Jihad, for being so...
Thank you, Poet Radwan. The original and the translation are really great. And actually, I allowed all this because I look at this session as a session for practitioners to interact with each other, exchange views and experiences, and we all learn. Thank you very much. Dear colleague Nizar, would you like to respond to Poet Radwan? Before I move on to Dr. Huda, she's
Just
been
briefly,
waiting.
I think we are running out of time. I'd like to thank him. It's really I'm great to hear him, and I'm happy that he has attended this, and I'm flattered by his. I feel flattered by his words. What can I say? But certainly he is a good poet and translator. So thank you, dear Radwan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Huda Halauchi, you are welcome. First time for us to interact here. The floor is all yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello, Dr. Jihad, and thank you very much for inviting us to this very interesting session. Actually, this session took me back long years back to my days when I was an undergraduate student at the Department of English, College of Arts, University of Mosul. I had and still I have that interest in poetry and literature, though my major is linguistics. Thank you very much, Dr. Nizar, for raising these issues concerning poetry and the translation of poetry. I do like to focus on one major point, which is that I think it's a must for our syllabus designers in colleges that are concerned with language, I mean English language, to include an item in the syllabus that is basically concerned with the translation of poetry. I think this area is missing in as far as our syllabus. I mean, at the Department of English or other departments. Sorry, in my university, this is missing. Our students actually, the undergraduate students, focus on text rather than poetry fully, and I found that the translation of poetry is very necessary in this field. Depending on this point, I do like to ask Dr. Nizar this question, please. As far as we have different genres in poetry, just like war poetry, romance, I mean, love poetry, poetry on nature, and the like. Is it possible to have some guidelines for the translators, as I mean, beginners, as the students, I mean, people who are interested in translation of poetry? Do we have such guidelines to follow in translating each particular genre, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nizar.
Thanks, Dr. Huda, for being with us and for being an attentive listener. I'm grateful to you. With regards to the young people, in my presentation, I have mentioned so many techniques of dealing with new poetry. But I'd say, first, these new translators need to do a lot of reading and a lot of translations. And it's okay to imitate at the beginning, but they need to go easy. They need to simplify the language, and they need to pay attention to the grammar, Arabic grammar. So many translators miss on this side. So much. That's all I can say in this regard. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, just on my part, a question to Nizar and a response to Radwan. I mean, to Nizar has translated a lot of poems, but tonight one of them was translated using al-khafif meter. يا خفيفا كفت به الحركات فاعلات مستفعل فاعلات. Now my question is, what determines the choice of a particular meter when you translate from English into Arabic? I mean, are there criteria? What really matters here? I want to understand. I mean, something can be translated using al-khafif, al-wafir, al-tawil, al-basit. I mean, why? Is it just a personal choice, or there are criteria, or at least there are some issues to be considered and taken into account in the selection of the target meter?
Thank you. Well, the one that I read, Al-Khafif, is a poem by Dr. Ghanem, translation by Dr. Ghanem of Shakespeare, and I never used this. Personally, I would say that I use simpler meters. For example, in my translation from Shakespeare, I used السريع البحر السريع مستفعل مستفعل فاعل. It's more musical. I don't think it gets any closer to the meter in English. I don't think so. They are two different types of prosody, but it's easier. مستفعل مستفعل فاعل. Or my translation of زيز الحصاد زيز الحصاد إننا again مستفعل مستفعل. Or my translation of هدية إن جئت إلى بيتي فاعل فاعل. These are simpler meters, and they are closer, if you like, they are closer to English meters. For example, in English we have mainly iambic and trochaic. There are other more complicated meters, but iambic, ta 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 ta, or trochaic, ta 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 ta. It's the opposite. So we need, I think, it's my advice to all translators, use as much as possible a very simple meter in Arabic if you must use rhyme and meter. But I don't think there are really guidelines. I've noticed that poets just select a meter, and for example, Dr. Asfour, I saw a translation of Dr. Asfour's translation of a poem by Shakespeare, and well, he just it's a Shakespearean sonnet, 14 lines, but he produced only maybe 10 lines, and he used, I think, al-kamil or something like that. Al-kamil, mutafa'ilun. That's an easy meter, but still, it was a little complicated for the poem.
Probably I can conclude that it's a personal choice.
Mostly, yes.
Yes. Now,
may I have a small note?
Yes, please. Please do.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dr. Nizar, since he is a well-established poet. I'm not a poet myself. I've been translating poetry, that's true, but I am 200 miles away from being a poet. I have opted for, I have translated classical Arabic poetry, some excerpts from classical Arabic poetry, and I have chosen the AA kind of meter rather than what's conventionally used in English in order to reflect the musicality of what we call بيت الشعر في اللغة العربية. بيت الشعر مكون من شطرين وفي ما يسمى عندنا وحدة البيت، يعني معظم الأشعار الجاهلية ممكن واحد يذكر بيت من الشعر مثلا المتنبي حكمه. Okay, the musicality in this kind of unity of the verse, I thought that it is best be presented by an AA kind of rhyme. What do you think?
And I agree. I've seen poems translated into English using that kind of rhyme. I agree wholeheartedly, because you're trying to replicate in a way what's being done in Arabic, only partly. That is the rhyme. So, well, great if you can do that. But do you mean that you use for every 2 lines, 1 rhyme for every 2 lines?
Yes. For every verse. Okay, so the rhyme is different from one verse to the other.
But I'm sure you had to kind of change the order of the line in order to have that end, to have that time.
Okay, that's true. So okay, the idea is to capture both content and prosody.
Yes.
Okay, but reflecting the theme as well as in a prosodic kind of template.
Yes, I'd love to read some of these poems. I'd love to read them. Please,
okay,
if you can.
I tell you what, I invite you to look at some of my posts there and let me know your opinion. Okay,
Where?
I have posted on Facebook. So look up my name, Fargal, Fargal, Farghal.
I know it very well.
And Muhammad is written in different forms. So my Muhammad is written with a double M-E-D.
I can't miss it. I'm sure I can.
Okay, so look it up and let me know your opinion. Okay. Thank you very much for this very interesting session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really think that sometimes the number of words in a line may make a difference. For instance, if you want to use a wheel, you need the original. You see, the line has lots of words in the original. I mean, you can't really render it using a meter in Arabic with a few number of words in each line. For instance, look at الطويل. طويل له بين البحور فضائل. You see, I mean, so many words. So if the original is heavy with words, you can't choose a meter that allows for a fewer number of words in each line. I think at least this is something that may be taken into account. It's up to you. But this is just a feeling on my part.
Yeah, this is one of the tricks, Abu Mu'ayyad. Okay, the phonological material is one of the variables. So there has to be correspondence in the amount of
words,
language used in each line. This is what we call the phonological.
I mean, this
material.
is lexical weight. I mean, lexical weight is also important.
Yeah, lexical as well as number of words. Okay, you don't want
that's right. Word count.
Yeah, you don't want one that is too long and one is too short. You know, you have to have some correspondence in terms of length. I agree with you.
Thank you. Now, a response to Radwan.
Jad, can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
While we're here in this topic, maybe in the future, there are a couple of topics in translation that can be discussed in the future, maybe after 5 months, 10 months, doesn't matter. One is translating to English, translating from Arabic rather. And the second one is about translating from another language and translating translated poetry, like the one I read by Frough Farzad.
Yeah.
In the future, maybe you can just throw this at what it's worth.
Dina is with us. She's a specialist in literature, and I'm sure Dina and her colleagues are taking notes as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Now to Radwan thinks that a poem has to be translated by a same poet, I mean, the one who has already composed it. On my part, I think this is, I mean, this could be fine, of course, but I hold a different perspective. I think a poet who composes poetry in Arabic, even if he knows English, he has to stay aside for a while, and then ask someone else maybe to translate his poetry. And this is what I really requested Abu Kamal to do. And Abu Kamal was generous. He accepted to translate 2 of my poems from Arabic into English, but I have not yet submitted these poems. So it's just a different perspective, yes. I mean, because, I mean, he can't be into the text twice. I mean, he should leave some space and should stand away from the text so that for someone to interact with this as a recipient and then as a reproducer. Anyway, other questions?
Well, could I please say a couple of words here, dear?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I believe when Dr. Jihad, when it comes to poetry, I think the heart of the matter, actually, or the crux of the matter, is we have to keep in mind what is the basic point and the essential point that any poetic text can have. Actually, what matters when it comes to poetry, what matters is not what to say, but how to say it. This is the beauty of poetry, actually, because if we just are to produce replicas of just content, then we will lose just the beauty of the language, where you have musicality, you have melody, you have rhyme, meter. These things actually make poetry more distinguished and more distinct in something like, you know, it is something really creative. But if we just read poetry in just prose, then we don't have what poetry is there for, actually. So I believe what matters here is not what to say, but how to say it. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dears.
I'd like to thank our colleague and friend, poet and translator, Nizar Sartawi, for being very generous with us tonight. His presentation was really rich and interesting. I liked it, and apparently my colleagues have also had similar feelings, same appreciation. Thank you again. Thanks to our colleagues and friends who are with us. And I leave it to Dr. Dina to close this session. She is the chair of the Academic Forum of Association of Professors of English and Translation at Arab Universities. Dina, thank you very much for all this effort as well.
Thank you.
I invite you to close this session.
يعطيكم العافية يعطيكم العافية.
Allah يعافيك. Mr. Sartawi, would you like to say something before I end today's session?
Certainly, I'd like to thank everybody for being so helpful, so generous, for being here. That's great, really. I'm honored and privileged. That's all.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Mr. Sartawi, thank you for your insightful and enjoyable talk. Dr. Jihad, thank you for moderating our session. This session will be available on YouTube in the next few days, and after we upload it on YouTube, I will share it on the official Facebook page of the association. And I will also probably send it through email because it seems that we've had some good attendance, and the session was very enjoyable and quite insightful. Our next session will be August 3rd, and that session will be focused on a topic on linguistics. So we would really be very delighted if you also join us for August 3rd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.